The sirens were still echoing when she froze one hand against the cracked concrete wall, eyes half closed, breathing steadying instead of spiraling. To everyone watching, it looked like panic. The rookies whispered that she was shutting down under pressure. Even her team leader took a step toward her, ready to pull her out of the danger zone. But they didn't know what she was doing, counting heartbeats. Not her own, someone else's. Someone trapped, silent, buried behind a slab of concrete so thick no one believed sound could pass through it. Yet she stood there, fingers trembling, not with fear but with focus, picking up the faint, uneven rhythm that told her one thing. Someone was still alive. She had been trained to read landscapes, analyze threats, and track movement, but this ability wasn't in any manual. It came from a childhood spent listening through walls for the pulse of a sick mother, counting each fragile beat until help arrived. That same instinct had saved lives in war zones, collapsed buildings, and ambush sites. Now, with dust swirling around her feet and shouts filling the air, she ignored the confusion on everyone's faces, because she could hear what no one else could. And if she was right, if that heartbeat was real, then this mission was about to turn into something far more dangerous than any of them expected. Dust rained from the ceiling as another shockwave rippled through the ruined structure. Her team ducked, weapons raised, waiting for orders. But she didn't move. She just pressed her palm flat against the cold concrete, her breathing slowing until it no longer matched the chaos around them. To the others it looked like the beginning of a breakdown. One soldier muttered, "She's losing it." Another glanced nervously toward the exit. Even her commanding officer stepped forward, ready to drag her away before she froze completely. But she wasn't freezing, she was filtering. Every vibration, every microscopic tremor, every echo bouncing through the fractured walls. She shut out the shouting, the alarms, even the sound of her own heartbeat. Then her eyes sharpened, focusing on nothing and everything at once. A faint pulse, slow, uneven, desperate, throbbed through the stone. A heartbeat where there shouldn't be one. She didn't look panicked anymore. She looked certain. She whispered, "There's someone alive back there." The team exchanged glances. Impossible, they thought. The collapse had sealed that corridor minutes ago. No one could have survived. But the look in her eyes was the same look she wore every time she was right. And she was always right. Long before she ever held a rifle or wore a uniform, she had mastered something far stranger: silence. Growing up in a crumbling apartment, she spent her nights listening through thin walls for signs that her mother's fragile heart hadn't stopped. Doctors came and went, electricity flickered. Neighbors fought and shouted. But through all that noise, she learned to hear the one sound that mattered each week: fluttering heartbeat. She didn't realize it was training. Not until years later, during her first mission, when a wounded civilian lay trapped under debris and the medics declared him gone. She knelt beside the wreckage, closed her eyes, and felt it, a faint rhythm, steady enough to mean hope. They broke protocol that day to dig him out. He survived. Word spread. Soon commanders called her in for impossible tasks: locating survivors in collapsed tunnels, identifying ambush by the tremor of hidden footsteps, sensing enemies moving behind walls thick enough to mute gunfire. She wasn't a psychic or a super soldier. She was someone who had spent her whole life listening because she was terrified of silence, terrified of losing the only heartbeat she ever counted. And now, that accidental gift was about to decide the fate of her entire team. Her team approached the collapsed corridor with hesitation. Flashlights streaked across broken beams and slabs of concrete stacked like a giant's discarded toys. "Nothing could have survived that," one soldier said. But she didn't answer. She stepped closer, pressing her ear to the wall, letting her fingertips trace the surface like a blind reader, deciphering a secret message. There, it was again, a soft, irregular thump. Not mechanical, not an echo, not debris settling, human. Weak, fading, but undeniably human. She motioned for silence. The team obeyed, the air freezing around them. She tapped the wall gently once, twice. After a moment, thump, thump. A response. Someone trapped behind the concrete was alive and conscious enough to signal back. Panic flickered across her team's faces. If someone was alive, it meant two terrifying possibilities: Either an ally who'd been reported missing or an enemy fighter left behind, rigged with explosives to bait rescuers. She didn't care. A heartbeat was a heartbeat. And she would not walk away. Her commander hesitated, weighing the risk. But then she spoke with a cold, quiet certainty. We dig, now, because she heard something else too, something the others couldn't detect. A second heartbeat, fainter, smaller, that meant whoever was inside wasn't alone. The moment the team began clearing debris, the entire structure groaned like a wounded animal. Dust spiraled down in thick clouds. Their commander cursed under his breath. One wrong move could trigger a full cave-in, but she guided them like a surgeon directing an operating room. Not that beam, this one. Shift it left, not back. Listen to the tension, she wasn't guessing. She was reading the architectural stress through sound, vibration, and instinct, sharpened by years of surviving worse wreckage than this. Sweat dripped down her neck as she pressed her ear to the concrete again. The first heartbeat was slowing. The second, lighter, fragile, was fluttering dangerously. Time was running out. They worked faster, hands bleeding, clothes coated in gray powder. A metal rod snapped, sending a violent shudder through the wall. The team froze, expecting collapse. But she stepped forward, holding the wall with both palms as if willing it to stay up. Somehow, it did. Her voice cracked but stayed firm. Keep going, piece by piece. The path opened just enough to shine a light through a narrow opening. A pair of terrified eyes looked back. She exhaled in relief. But that relief vanished instantly when she saw the wires strapped across the survivor's vest. And the heartbeat she heard wasn't fear, it was a countdown. The trapped man shook his head violently, trying to warn them away. The bomb vest was badly damaged, wires exposed, timer crushed, but the pressure sensor was still active. One wrong movement could kill everyone. Her team pulled back instantly, adrenaline surging, but she stayed. She crouched low, her voice calm enough to steady the air around them. I'm going in, she said. Her commander's eyes widened. Absolutely not, she ignored him. She slid through the narrow gap, scraping her shoulders against jagged concrete, ignoring the dust choking her lungs. Inside, the space was barely big enough to kneel. The heartbeat under her fingertips trembled like a snare drum on the edge of breaking. She pressed her hand to the bomb vest, not to disarm it, but to feel. The pressure plate had a rhythm, pulsing with mechanical precision. She closed her eyes, syncing it with the man's terrified heartbeat. 2 rhythms, one organic, one deadly. She whispered instructions to the team outside. When I say pull, you pull him out. No hesitation, they protested, but she cut them off. Trust me. Then she inhaled, waited for the exact moment when the pressure pulse aligned with the heartbeat, and shouted, Now! The team yanked the survivor free. The plate deactivated instead of detonating. Silence followed, not fear victory. And she finally allowed her own heartbeat to roar back to life. The dust finally settled, drifting down in slow, lazy spirals as if the battlefield itself was exhaling in relief. Her team stood frozen, staring at the survivor they had pulled out and then at her hands scraped. Uniform torn, face streaked with dirt but eyes steady as ever. The man she saved kept whispering the same words again and again. I thought no one would hear me, but she had. Through concrete, chaos, and the kind of fear that makes most people shut down, she heard what no one else could. Not just a heartbeat hope. Her commander walked over, his voice low, almost reverent. We thought you were panicking, he admitted. She gave a tired, crooked smile. I was counting, and that single sentence changed everything they thought they knew about her. Because some soldiers shoot straighter, some run faster, some carry heavier gear. But she carried something no training could ever give, a gift born from years of listening in the dark, of refusing to let silence mean loss. And on that day, in a collapsing building with time running out, it wasn't brute strength or firepower that saved a life. It was her heartbeat. Listening for someone else's, they walked out together, every step echoing one truth the team would never forget. She wasn't panicking. She was hearing a life no one else could.